everyone. Welcome back to the channel for this edition of the Firewood Addicts podcast series, episode number 5. We're here with Brandon. Brandon, say hi.
Hi, folks.
All right. So Brandon is in my area. Brandon, where are you hailing from, and what is your background?
I'm from South Central Alaska, about 35 minutes north of Anchorage or so. In my background, I am at least 5th generation in the woods. My grandmother was born and raised in a logging camp in the Northeast, and she's pretty sure that her grandfather was what started it. So a little bit of vague there, but yeah, carried down to the generations. We moved up to Alaska, or the family did, in '67, and we started a firewood outfit in '84. Again, family. I was born in '86, so they beat me to it a little bit. But some of my first memories were in the woods. For instance, man, I forgot what year the big Exxon Valdez oil spill was, but I was 2 or 3. It was '88 or '89, and I think my very first memory is going to the landing. My uncle was hooking chokers for the helicopter, and my dad was on the landing unhooking, and I can remember seeing a big white Huey coming in with a turn of wood underneath it for dunnage for the oil spill. And then, from there I was in a car seat in a log truck, and it's just been part of my life forever. It's, at the very least, it's nostalgic, and for a long time it's what fed our family. So yeah, I guess you can say that makes me a bit of a I don't want to say addict. That has a negative connotation, but a bit of an obsession.
Yeah, so I use addict, but I think obsession is definitely fitting to have more of a positive connotation to it. But yeah, so it sounds like, so my next question would be like your how do you got into firewood, but you were born into firewood. So I guess so by being, I mean, like, if like for me growing up, I did I did a lot of construction and landscaping to the point where I hate landscaping now. But you grew up in firewood, logging, etc., woods, but yet you still are loving firewood.
Well, the flip side of that, though, is about 90, 96, 97, we started our own excavation out. They started an excavation outfit. Once natural gas kind of came into our area and firewood prices plummeted, and it wasn't a value anymore, we went over to the excavation side of things. So it's been more nostalgic now, probably because most of my year is spent digging residential excavation houses and stuff than the firewood. All of our wood comes off of the houses we dig. Firewood is actually a byproduct of excavation for us. It's a way for us to get rid of an otherwise unused product. A lot of the other excavators in our area, they'll rip the trees down with an excavator, bury them, burn them on site, whatever. This is actually a marketable resource that we can bring to our homestead and then process in the winter when it's convenient for us.
Gotcha. So are you still in that business now to dig in? Okay, so that's okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Awesome.
We're getting close to starting our season. Up here in the frozen north, pretty much grinds to a halt in November, and then for us it's maintenance and firewood season at that point. So things are thawing out. We're about to start digging some houses.
So then, as of right now, we are in the later portion of March. How warm is it, or cold is it right now?
We're having kind of an unseasonably warm March. It's here today. It was like 46 when I started the interview. It's actually thawing fast. It's really nice. So we can get outside and do a little bit more productive stuff.
Yeah, I bet.
A month and a half ago, it was almost 40 below.
Oh, geez. So is there still snow right now currently on the ground?
It's getting patchy. Yeah.
Okay.
But we had we had almost record snowfalls this year.
Did you
I think
really?
where I'm
Wow.
at, we had 6 feet, sounds about right, 5 to 6
Mm-hmm.
feet. And obviously, it snows and then packs down. Not like there's that
Mm-hmm.
much up there right now, but yeah, we had a lot of snow. So
Right on. Can you share with us where you're at in your home?
I'm in my garage in my little saw shop, back in the corner, trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I got a little 021 steel here that's not fueling, so figure I'd chat and poke at this thing while we're doing this.
I like it. Rock and roll. Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's get it back into the potatoes here. Meat and potatoes with the interview. Um, are you currently heating with firewood in your home?
So I built my home 2020, and I haven't got a wood stove installed yet. I got a slab on grade and in-floor heat. So my idea there was to get a big outside wood fire boiler. All the cottonwood and a lot of the stumps and a lot of the bigger stuff that we don't sell. What my thought was to just chunk it into 2-foot sections and heave it in a outside boiler. That way, I am using something that the company can't or doesn't really use, and is really good well, not really good, but decent BTUs, free BTUs to heat my house with. I just haven't made the step yet. It's like 15 grand to get rolling, and I'm not quite there yet.
Are outdoor wood boilers a big thing in Alaska to have?
They are actually. A lot of people have. A lot of people have indoor wood fire boilers, but my wife is nervous about smelling like smoke in the house and house fires. Haven't quite got her convinced yet. She grew up in a house with a kind of a leaky wood stove, so she's got some preconceived notions that what it's probably going to be when modern stoves seal really well. You can get your air intake outside, which that helps. Chimneys are a lot tighter than they used to be, so she just isn't quite convinced yet. We'll see if I can change that.
Are you going to go as far as to connect it to your hot water tank so the boiler would heat your water as well during the winter time? Okay.
That's what I have now. I've got a boiler system, and then I got a sidearm hot water heater. And if I can get that wood fire in front of the lock-in bar I've got hanging on the wall, then either I can not worry about the boiler coming on at all, or I just take that water up from whatever the wood fire boiler sends it at and brings it up a couple degrees, and that saves my natural gas bill a lot. And if I'm away and not able to feed the stove, the house would actually go out there and keep the boiler warm and keep it from freezing. So,
gotcha.
And the other thing that would be nice is my wife wants to do a greenhouse setup. And if we get a big enough boiler, we can plug in other things to the outside boiler. And she could do a real big greenhouse that get started in February, because she's got heat loops in there, and get it warm and get plants going early.
Right on. So have you used a wood boiler before?
I have not, but there's lots of people around me that have, lots of friends, family. I'm familiar with it. I've just never been intimately involved in one myself.
I gotcha. I asked because there's a lot of people who, from what I understand on YouTube, that have wood boilers, and they throw, I mean, like you're saying, the junky wood, stuff that you can't really sell because it won't really matter. But some of the wood is unseasoned or like half seasoned, or sometimes it's very green because it doesn't really matter in that context because you're just throwing in big chunks. Do you have an opinion yet of say that you have a stump, but or a piece that is junk, but would you want that to be seasoned or the semi-dry, or whatever the condition is, you're just going to toss it in?
At the very least, semi-dry, because green wood creates creosote. Creosote builds in your chimney, and that can be a major problem down the road if you're not careful. Anytime you can burn a drier wood, you're way better off.
Yeah. That, and you get more heat from that wood too.
Yep.
Even though you may have a whole bunch of it, but still, like, I mean, it's not like it's nothing. So okay, I got you. Great, thank you for sharing. What kind of wood do you have up there? I guess when you're clearing a lot, it would have different species. But what's the most common wood that's, I guess, you're clearing, and a common wood that you're selling?
So we've got three major species up here. We got our Alaska birch. At I think it's sitting at, oh man, I wish I might be a liar here for too long, but I think it's at 26 million BTUs per cord. We got various spruce species. The white spruce is what we commonly have, and I think it's 18 million BTUs per cord, and then poplar, cottonwood, aspen at somewhere around 14. And those numbers are close, but they might not be exact. But our common sale firewood for us is birch, because it's the highest quality. It's the most readily available up here, where we're building anyway. There's a lot of spruce on the outliers that a spruce beetle has come through and killed, and a lot of people sell that because that stuff actually dries standing until it rots, and it burns hot, burns fast, but it doesn't burn as long. A lot of people like buying that, especially the more boutique buyers that want a crackling fireplace, not necessarily to heat their house, but something for ambiance. They would prefer the dry spruce because of what it does, its characteristics. And we have sold some of the cottonwood before, but with that, you have to be very honest in your marketing. I try to tell people that BTU per cord, it's a little less than, or a little more than half the BTU per cord of birch. So we try to market it at about half the price of birch. And sometimes that can be attractive to some folks. It has its issues. It ashes really bad, and I'm sure everybody viewing here really probably knows, what cottonwood does. But again, it's something that it's mostly we're just trying to be rid of and recoup a little bit of hauling it in to the homestead to process it. And some people want it, some people like it, some folks that's what they can afford, and they're extremely happy for it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess enough to sell it to where it will even out with your time to fuss with it, to process it, and to get it dry.
Fairly.
Yeah, like maybe break even. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and we don't. So the way we operate, we don't have any in this area. You go up north, and there are rules about selling seasoned wood. We don't do a lot of drying for ourselves. If we could, what we'd actually sometimes we do, back the log truck in there, stretch it out, and have the excavator kick out a road for the truck, and we will actually pick the wood right off the stump basically and put it on the truck, haul it to the processor. Somebody modified our Cord King processor to accept full tree length logs. So truck, processor, dump truck, and then haul it out. So it's still very green frequently when we sell it. And there's a lot of people that like to self-season their wood. You get it a little better buy. They know exactly what they're getting at that point. They know how long it's been seasoning for. So we don't sit on a lot of processed wood.
Gotcha. That, I think so. It's good to know your area and what people want to buy, and how they want to buy it. Interesting.
It breeds a little different customer too.
Okay.
We've noticed that the people that want to get ahead of the curve, most folks that are prepared to do things and they want to get a good buy, usually you don't have to fight them for payment, and they're happy to pay you what it's worth, and you don't get any argument over it. And yeah, it's kind of nice dealing with those kind of people in this business, because sometimes you get the people that call you and, hey, I need firewood yesterday. You need to bring me some like now, and it's going to be this price. And I go, no, you're not controlling this conversation here. I don't have to sell to you. And quite frankly, if you're coming at me like that, I don't want to sell to you. And you just don't get that with the seasoned or the green wood.
I guess that's interesting. I mean, I guess if you only sold seasoned wood, you may have those type of customers, but because you're selling green, that doesn't really happen. That makes sense. And I agree with you. It's good to be in a position where you can say no to people. Like, if you're gonna give me issue or lip, I'm gonna cancel the sale right now because I don't need the money that bad. You can go someplace else and hassle them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I learned
Yeah.
one time, it was 2015, I think. I had a customer, somebody called me. They wanted to come, or they wanted to know how dry the wood was. And I said, well, it's about this. There was a short time where we piled up, I don't know, 150 cords, let it dry under a really big tarp. And he came out, I hit it with the moisture meter. It was what it was. I even tried to split it so we got the core moisture, not what was on the outside that might be,
Mm-hmm.
not representative of what the whole thing was.
Mm-hmm.
He got a cord of wood from us. Fortunately, it was right down the road. And then a week later, he called me back and said, I can't get this stuff to burn. I want my money back. So, trying to have a good name in the area, I went back, gave him his money back, and threw all the wood back on my truck. And don't call me again. But yeah, that's, as soon as I start getting customers these days that are inquiring hard on moisture content, and I get some of that, but if you want to come out and look at it, I'm going to go, we might not be the people for you. Why don't you call this guy down the road? Because I just don't want to deal with that sort of thing. And maybe not everybody's got that mentality, but I would much rather pass on a sale than have a customer that was either unsatisfied or like this guy just was begging, well, not begging, demanding his money back.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I was thinking about this the other day in terms of sales, and retail, and the saying that the customer is always right. But maybe I'm wrong on this, but in firewood sales, there could be customers that are not right. And if you're honest, like you're saying that you are upfront with people, like, I'm selling non-seasoned wood. It may not be green. It could be semi-seasoned or somewhere in that spectrum, but probably not ready to burn. You could burn it. You could try. It may smolder, but because it's not seasoned, I want to sell you this for this much money. So I think that would be like some sort of logic that, like, okay, I'm buying this on it. It's cheaper because it's not seasoned. But and then if they're gonna argue with you, like, that's interesting to, like, kind of to ponder, and like you're saying, like, you want to make sure that your name isn't like spoiled in your area for being like a guy who sells bad wood or whatever, even though I'm sure you don't. Yeah, but to have so many cores available, and I'm sure, and to have the recurring customers and new customers come to you, it is nice to be able to say no to people if it's not going to drive, it's not going to be a match right away. Then say, you know what, just like you said, just go down the road. I don't think that we're going to work out. This is not worth the hassle and the stress over the whole thing, I'm sure.
Well, and firewood is it's a major source of heat in this area again, because we're starting to get subdivisions on outlying areas that aren't serviced by natural gas. So it's either pay $4.50, $3.50 a gallon for heating oil, or get your firewood for, your $300 a cord is what it goes for in my area. And so we're starting to get a lot more calls again. If I turn this guy down, I guarantee there's going to be somebody else calling tomorrow. It's just, people need to keep their house warm. Like I said, a couple minutes ago, it was 40 below a month and a half ago. We got a lot of calls. And for us, we do about 100 cords a year, and we do that in December and January. So I get a lot of calls in February that we're sold out. What we
really sold out.
frequently do now,
Wow.
yeah, well, we bring in our building stuff, depending on how many houses we do, we can bring in 200 cords a year. My father is the head of this thing. He likes to sell about 100 cords of tree length. So we've got a self-loading log truck, and we've had customers for a long time that like self-process season and all that. So he serves those guys for about 10, maybe 15 truckloads at 10 cord truckloads. And then we bring them the rest to the homestead, and we let it set on a deck for a year. If you let any wood sit too long, it's got that nice waterproof wrapper around it, it's going to rot. But we found that for our local stand, if you let it set for about a year, it'll draw it down to about 40% moisture. And then we process out of that. So we are out of stock of the 2021 season wood that came into the homestead. We still have 80, 90, 100 cords that came in 2023, but we're not quite ready to run it through the processor and kick it out yet. So that's when I say sold out, that's kind of what I mean by that, is we still have some on hand. It's just not ready for this year's processing.
Yeah. And yeah, okay, gotcha. You mentioned 300. Is that so you would sell a cord of firewood that is processed and not seasoned, but on the spectrum of being seasoned per cord, correct? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay.
300 per cord.
Interesting. And that would be
seasoned,
mixed wood, or so go ahead.
No, it's just we work off of just straight birch. Anything birch. We get some spruce that we'll set aside, and if people ask for a little bit of spruce in there for kindling and stuff, that's our local fire starter. Is if you use the beetle kill for fire starter, and then that more BTU per cord wood for your long-term fuels. If they ask for it, we'll throw it in there, but otherwise we try to advertise and keep up all birch, because that's what most people want in this area, is that higher BTU per cord wood.
Mm-hmm. And then if the cord of wood of birch was seasoned, what would be the cost on that, or price?
I've seen $350 to $385. There's some people around here that actually will throw it in a kiln, and I've seen up to $425. Mm-hmm. The more you handle it, the more you get out of it, right? So that's just not the way we do, but that's about what prices are for it around here.
Gotcha. And then when you're selling, are people wanting to buy, or are you willing to or able to sell at a third of a cord increment, or is it only cords?
So for us, we typically will only do a 2 cord minimum limit. Okay. We've got, all of our excavation dump trucks and stuff, that's about what they hold, and it's more economic for us and frequently them if they can afford to spend $600 for us to come once, and then it's better money on both ends. Mm-hmm. For them and us. My 14-year-old is getting into the family business, and he's kind of doing his own thing, and he's selling individual cords, but a lot of them are coming out to the house to get it, and we've got little buckets he's been filling, and I've been dumping them onto people's pickups and stuff with the telehandler. It's easy, it's quick. I don't have to have a lot of involvement, and he doesn't have to go out and mow lawns. We can sell firewood. Yeah. So.
Right on. Yeah, there's money to be made.
That's about the only time we do. Yep. Okay. That's about the only time we do one cord stuff.
So then, if you're loading, so these are like big full-size dump trucks, right? That you have.
Yeah. 10 yard, 12-yard dump trucks.
Okay. So then, if you're putting 2 cords tossed into a full-size dump truck, are you using a loader that had like a 1 yard a scoop on it to load, or use a conveyor, or what are you using?
Nope, it's being conveyed right off the firewood processor. Minimal handling, so it just goes
Awesome.
from the log truck onto the processor, and then up the conveyor into the truck.
Awesome. Less touching. That's the best way, right? So it's definitely okay. So is it almost to the point where like a customer comes to you or they call you, text you saying, "Hey, Brandon, I need 2 cords." So then you fire up the processor after that phone call or text, and you literally make their order, and like whenever you have time, and then you would. Oh, is that how that works almost?
Effectively, yes. So I work another job for the state. It's a week on, week off schedule. And Dad gets most of the phone calls. I do a lot of the Facebook marketplace stuff, and I just forward all that to him. So he'll line up, I don't know, anywhere between 6 and 12 cords for one of my days off. And my uncle, my cousin, my dad, and I all go out there and we'll bang out truckload after truckload after truckload on one day and fill up a week's worth or 2 weeks worth of orders in a day.
Wow, that's a lot of firewood. Do you like you may not have timed it, but do you have some sort of a in your mind a how long it would take between starting up your processor in and then having the conveyor load the last piece of wood of the 2 cord load into one dump truck? How long would that take from tree log to piece of firewood?
We actually pay pretty close attention to that. We're kind of efficiency freaks and
Right
like
on.
to push the issue a little bit there. With a 4-man crew, 2 guys on the ground, anything under probably 4 inches, we hand process because we've got a big 48-inch circle saw on that processor, and I don't want to cycle that thing for small wood. And actually, a lot of the stuff that's 4 to 3 inches, it doesn't even get split. It's good for staying power on fires. So you throw the wood in at night and around, and it'll hold longer than something that's split, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we got 2 people doing that. Dad's up on the tower of the self loader feeding the firewood processor, or if there's any that are real crooked and stuff, he sets them down, and then he runs down and bucks them into manageable lengths that when I run them through the processor, sitting the seat's my job. When I run them through, they're not going to twist and be difficult in the saw. And at that rate, we can do timber stand depending, logs depending, somewhere between 4 and 6 cords an hour.
Wow.
So that's what, 3 to 4 trucks an hour.
Yeah. I think that would definitely be impressive to watch and to see. Maybe like what, because I'm sure it's not one of these newer ones from Canada, but the Eastern made. I'm sure it's something that is it? Or what do you have?
So we got a Cord King. I think it was made in 2008. We bought it off somebody up north in 2015, but it's got a 48-inch circle saw. It's got a couple live chains. Somebody stretched it out to, like I think I said earlier, they cut it in half, put a big section in there to get whole trees on it. So I've got 2 drive chains out at the ends that roll the log onto a big trough that'll feed the log up to the circle saw. The circle saw drops the wood into a 8-way splitter, and then it runs across the little grizzly and then up the conveyor into the truck. It's a pretty handy unit. This brand in particular, I'm noticing it's got a lot of cheap build things, and other, like for instance, the hydraulic tank is welded to the frame. Well, you have that engine running, the saw running, all that stuff. It causes vibration. What happens to metal when it sits there and vibrates over a long length of time, right? So we've actually had to fix cracks in tanks before because it's not isolated. The engine is bolted directly to the frame. There's no rubber isolation in there. And these are actually things I've talked to Cord King about, and I don't know if they fixed them, but this year, while we had it in the shop going through our annual maintenance stuff on it, I got a hold of somebody up there and, hey, I don't know if you want to know or not, but here's what your machine is doing 15, 16 years later, and it might help you for development in the future. They seemed appreciative. I don't know if they just wanted to, just shut me up and send me on my way, because I'm just one guy and they're a fairly big outfit, but 2,000-3,000 hours on the machine, and these are the things I'm finding. It's worth trying to look into, I think, if you're trying to build a quality product.
I agree with you. I think that the feedback is good. Yeah.
Yep.
Right on. You mentioned going from, you would put like whole logs on your log trucks and then driving to the processor, but then you still have the roots. Or do you cut the base off on site?
Oh yeah,
before you put on the truck,
they get logged. So when we go to cut the lot, everything is logged like you would in a professional logging organization. It's notched, wedged, tipped over, limbed, and then we have a 50,000 pound excavator that will either, again, build the road for the log truck to come in and pick it up, or we will pick it up with the thumb or chokers. Sometimes we do a lot of shovel choker logging and run it out to the wood run it out to the road where the log truck can get at it. When it goes down the road, it doesn't have any limbs on it. It's just basically poles on the truck going down the road.
Gotcha.
There's a responsibility there. You don't want the limbs and stuff attached. And in our area, burying stumps for gravel, you break them up real small and you bury them, bring up your gravel for building the house is common practice, and a huge savings for the customer. Because I know we're kind of going off firewood and on to the other thing right now, but those stumps can save you $20,000 on your excavation bill, because now you don't have to haul them off or burn them, and you don't have to buy the gravel to build your foundation up with. So it's a major savings. And if you are very diligent, you can dense them down in the hole enough where they're not going to create big sinkholes. You see, in the past, I've come up on jobs that there are sinkholes where you look down and you don't know where the bottom is. But if you take your time, get material in around the stumps and dense them down, you won't sink. See, our ground temperature up here is 37 degrees. When was the last time you had something actually rot and decay in your refrigerator, right? You can keep carrots in there for a long time. I've gone back to stump holes, if somebody wants to build a building where their stump hole is from 40 years ago, it's all got to come out of there or the building's going to settle. I've pulled solid trees that are 40 years down on the ground out of there. Things do not rot down there at 37 degrees. So that's just not really an issue up here for burying, and it's a savings for everybody.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I want to go, so I mentioned or asked about a small splitter because you said that the small diameter logs they don't go into your processor. They are split, they're bucked up and split separately. So they would be by hand, or how would you process those ones?
So with our stand, we don't have a lot of the really twisted stuff that you guys do down south. I mean, some of it is, but it's pretty easily manageable. I think, this is an opinion, the single wedge splitter for what we're dealing with is a waste of time. I can hand process, or I can hand split probably close to a quart of wood in 15 minutes by hand. And that's, you go along, you tip them all up, you take your split and maul, your axe, and you go through and you beat them all in half or quarters, and you don't have to pick them up, put them on the splitter, wait for that thing to cycle, and so on. So I'm sure they have their place. It's just not here with me. And I get a good workout. I'm getting kind of old and kind of fat, so I need to run that split and maul a little more these days, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of us need to understand that even though from the single wedge all the way to the processors, it's a good feeling to have a solid axe or a maul in your hand. And the hand split sometimes, there is a time and place for that. And it's not a bad thing because if you know what you're doing, it is a good workout, and it feels good when you're done. Like I did this pile, whatever is in front of me, by hand. That was me, not this machine next to me. This is here. You know. Yeah, definitely.
Well, and I forget what I was watching. It might have even been one of your videos the other day. It's an expense. It's overhead. A single wedge splitter is what? I don't even know. Is it $1,000, $2,000?
Yeah,
That's a
average.
lot of. That's 3.5 cords of wood on the low end, right? That you have to process just to pay for that splitter to buy it. That's not to
Hmm.
feed it, maintain it, and so on, so on. So if you don't need it, and again, I'm seeing you guys got 3-foot diameter wood down there that I probably wouldn't want to try to split by hand, especially if it was knotty and twisted. I watched your cottonwood video right before we got on here, and you at the beginning of the video you were showing some of this stuff. I'm like, yep, that's stuff that I would definitely run through the splitter. I wouldn't try to waste my time beating it apart with a splitting maul. Um, there's a place for that, just
Hmm.
not here.
I gotcha. Interesting to get
So
your viewpoint on that. Thank you. Um, yeah, and for someone who has a massive processor, to still hand split is humbling. That you're not so used to the splitter or your processor, or you're almost like above it type thing. To say that, like, yes, I do hand split from time to time, not always, and there is a time and a place for different tools. So
well, let's put it this
uh,
way: sometimes under the right timber stand, or the right loads of wood, the 2-man on the ground can outrun that processor in spurts. Obviously, the machine isn't going to fatigue where they are, but I've got some pretty robust helpers. Well, I shouldn't say helpers because the uncle owns the company. He's down there splitting and throwing on the conveyor, but they're pretty tough. But still, if they can outrun that machine, sometimes that's saying something. You pay 60 to 100 grand for that processor, and you still have people with a chainsaw and a split maul outrunning it
mhm.
under the right wood. They're not going to do it with
Yes,
a 20-inch birch log with knots in it. It's just not going to happen.
yeah.
And they're actually throwing it on the conveyor, so it's not just them splitting. I just realized too, because that machine is conveying the wood up into the truck for them. If that machine wasn't there, they'd have to throw it on the truck too. So,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of value in being able to hand process and realizing when it is and when it isn't efficient.
Yeah, to look at like a round and say, I can do that by hand, or look at it like, yeah, I'm not going to even attempt it. It's not worth my time. I'm going to throw it up there and have it sit there. Yes, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. We were chatting before, so the segue about fuel uh, um, up there, and I usually ask what people are running in their chainsaws. And can you tell me what you're running fuel wise in your chainsaws up there?
So I'm running 91 octane pump gas. I couldn't find ethanol fuel up in Alaska if I tried. I don't think it's not a thing up here. So that's my choice. I did 1 gallon of the premix stuff for my 500 I break in because the dealer said that they will double the warranty if I run that or buy a box of this Steel Ultra, which I do not recommend anymore, by the way. But you had to buy to get the warranty, so I bought it and ran it for the first gallon in my 500, and it's good stuff. It smells weird. The exhaust smells almost sweet when you're running it, but I have no problem with it. It's just I think it was $36 a gallon,
Wow.
and I can mix a gallon of gas for what it's gas right now is $4 a gallon up here plus a mixer, which is let's call it $4 or $5 a gallon.
Hmm.
Um, I ain't spending $35 a gallon on the premix stuff when I can do it for 5 and get a good
Yeah.
product. Now, you guys down there, I'm Alaska. This is I'm a subject matter expert in my area. I don't know about you guys, but if you had the ethanol concern, I might consider it, burning that expensive gas, because these lines, they get ate up with that ethanol stuff, or the gaskets in the carb and diaphragms.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably worth running the expensive gas, but I don't have that problem, so that's what I run and why I run.
Gotcha. Can you share what oil you're using in your mix if you're not using the still cans?
So I usually run Red Armor at 40 or 50 to 1, depending on the saw. The more modern stuff, I usually stick more towards 50 to 1. All my old, like my 2 Series Huskies, I'll run 40 to 1. I'm experimenting. So AMSOIL put out a oil they call Saber, and they say it's good to run to 100 to 1. And I tend to trust their engineers, but I'm a big chicken. So I'm actually running it at 70 to 1 right now, and I've seen no ill effects from it. I think it's good stuff. I don't know. For me, it works. I don't know everybody else's situation. I don't know if you can see this. This saw right here is sitting on the floor. The bar tip is on the floor. Wow. I run a 60-inch chainsaw mill, and milling is hard on a power head. So I will run a much richer oil for that to protect the bottom end on those long, hard pulls. Mm-hmm. And there might be other people out there that change their oil ratios based on stuff like that. So it's an interesting adventure. I went away from the steel because I've been pulling a lot of these. I don't have one readily available. Pull the exhaust off the cylinder when I'm doing a port job or something, and I'm seeing just a lot of carbon buildup. If that carbon breaks loose and goes back into your cylinder, or the cylinder, it's a bad day. Or I've seen them to the point where they get so carbon built, and this probably isn't just with steel oil, but they get so carbon built that they'll actually choke off the exhaust port, and the thing can't breathe, it can't run, right? Mm-hmm. If that's choked off to 50% of what it is from the factory, it's not going to run right. So I've had really good success pulling the exhaust off and looking at these things after running 5 gallons of fuel through them, and they're still very clean. I can take my finger and I can run red oil off of the Red Armor saws out of their exhaust port. It's just a very clean burn, which that speaks for something.
Mm-hmm. It's good to know, or to be at least cognizant or aware of the oil you're using in your mix, and because you're spending a lot of money on these chainsaws, and if you're using crappy oil in your mix, your head's not going to last very long. And then you take it to the local shop, they're going to tell you need a new cylinder and a piston. Sometimes that's almost not worth fixing because of the current worth of the saw. You might as well just buy a new saw. So to the stress to people, use good oil in your mix and use good fuel. Now, when you're not running your chainsaws all year round because of the weather, I assume, right?
Yes and no. I don't run them as much. If it's sub-zero, I tend to run them, but I don't mind cutting out to 0 degrees.
So there's not they're months on end. I got what you're saying.
No, not at all.
So your saws aren't sitting long enough with the fuel that has ethanol in it to do lasting damage. So like they're not sitting with the fuel tank of gas in your chainsaws for like 6 months, where it could build up in your to eat your lines, or to build up in your carbon or diaphragm would get
no,
dry.
I usually don't have that. But again, I don't have ethanol either. So
yeah,
it's probably fine for me to do some of that. I don't particularly care to leave them full. I mean, for the fact that it drains out sometimes and yet have a mess. But I try to empty them out for that reason, if nothing else. I don't see a lot of bad carb issues from sitting full of gas. Usually I see impulse lines and stuff ripped from just being 20, 25, 30 years old. Right.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, so then if you are storing a saw, you're saying that you store the tank of that saw empty.
I try to. I'm
Try
looking
to.
over my shoulder right now, and my 660's got half a tank of fuel in it.
Yeah, I see it.
But you know, it's what I try to do. I just ran that thing, I don't know, 3 or 4 days ago, and I will probably run it soon again.
Hmm.
I've got some burls out in the yard that I want to mill up, so it's going to be on duty for some of that. And I will try to leave it empty for the summer set. So I'll probably run these things until May usually, and then they might sit, or a large portion of them may sit for a long time. You know, the big milling saws and some of the smaller stuff that I just have for more fun stuff will sit. My 500 will probably go with me and run a lot. My little 361 under my knee here will probably go with me and run a lot. But a lot of these things will sit and veg out for 5-6 months, and I'll try to make
Gotcha.
sure they're empty for that. And,
Right
or
on.
I'll look
Right
down and see a puddle on them and then try to go empty them out because there's a puddle on my garage floor because I wasn't diligent enough to empty them out before I put them in.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. I wanted to circle back when you're when the logs are too small to go through the processor, and you're more or less having to buck them up by hand, and possibly most times you would split them by hand too. Um, how are you measuring to get 16? You're maybe not you, but maybe like your team. Are you using it by eye or some sort of measuring stick or tool, or what are you using?
Pretty much always by eye. So the processor, it's got a big plate that when the log comes down, it butts up against the plate, and I can't make it any longer in the preset length. But the hand stuff, usually the guys are just doing it by eye. And again, we are in the bulk sales for people to heat their houses with over long term. The length, give her, you know, plus or minus a half inch, nobody's gonna bulk over that, right? So if you can see 15.5 to 16.5 inches, you're gonna be okay, quality wise. Again, if I were trying to sell to a boutique person, I got a buddy that he's real good friends. He does 4 cords, 5 cords a year. He goes through and he'll measure with a tape measure 16 inches and draw with an ink or what do they call it, paint marker every 16
Hmm.
inches. Make sure he cuts it on that. Make sure everything is split down to that, so the guy he's delivering it to in a really ritzy environment has very consistent wood. That customer that I'm thinking of right now, he just enjoys burning wood. It's not his primary heat source, and he wants something very specific for that. So that's where I think the length matters most, not just somebody heaving big chunks into their boiler or, you know, big wood stove in the garage.
Hmm.
So we have a little grace on that in our bulk area.
Yeah, I bet. Sounds like it. Sounds like it. And I'm sure that if you're around firewood logs, chainsaws enough, you can just eye something and know where to put that bar to start cutting. So
I'd
that
like
makes
to think
sense.
so. I'd
Yeah,
like to think
I
so.
hear you. Yeah, there's a lot of tools out there to use. It's interesting to um, get people's take on it. But cool. Um, right now, behind you or in your garage or shop, what is your, I don't know, like you're around so much wood, Brandon. On an average job, what would be your go-to saw?
And my 500 right now.
500i.
Um,
Yeah.
so when we were on scene when the 371 Huskies came out, and they ran for 25 years. I think that is the best saw ever made. It got a proven run, really well balanced, and that's very important when you're dealing with a saw is the balance. Excellent power, very responsive, but they've kind of gone out, right? They've been replaced by the 5 Series of Huskies. And I like trying things. So when the 500i came out, I gave it a couple years because I don't trust EFI right off the bat. But I gave it a few years, and then I bought 500, and so far I'm fairly impressed. I only have 100 or so hours on it right now, so I can't sing its praises too much yet because I haven't wore one out yet. But so far I'm really liking it. My dad and uncle, they're kind of still dyed in the wool husky guys, so they've got some 5 Series huskies, a lot of 562s, a couple 572s, and sorry, I'm getting all my numbers jumbled together. The 562 Mark 1s, for whatever reason, we are having a hard time with them staying together. They'll die when they're idling, and they won't start again. They kind of hot flood, which I've heard that people ventilate the cowl on them, and that helps. We've had one that actually fell out of ignition timing, and it would not pull at all. Uncle took it to the dealer, and he says, "All right, guys, you guys just fixed this. Watch this." And he revved it up, and he put it into a pallet and stalled the chain. You should not be able to stall a chain on a saw in a pallet.
Yeah.
He got that one, got a new one under warranty on that one. Some of the brains in the Autotune aren't staying together. You get brain damage, I say. The 572s had a couple problems. What I've been doing to mitigate some of that for them is Husqvarna has a hard retune feature where you let it idle for a certain amount of time and then you run it wide open. They say, the one I read is you put your bar tip in a piece of wood and you do a ripping cut for 16 feet, and that'll reset your high jet tune. So I do that fairly regularly, and it seems to be working. I have high hopes for their new Mark IIs that are coming out to fix some of that. That way, they don't have that black eye anymore. We've been a husky family forever, mostly. And I really want to see Husqvarna do well. But in that case, they had some fixing to do. I went to Steel because our Steel dealer is a lot of bit better than our husky dealer in the area. And dealer support is huge. I'm not a brand loyal guy. I would much rather be able to go down and buy the parts I need or get the support I need. I do most of my own saw work, mechanic work, but to be able to talk to the techs there is huge, right? And I actually worked at our local steel shop for almost 2 years, 15 years ago. So I know a lot of those guys fairly decently. And to be able to just text them and be like, "Hey, I got this going on. What do you think?" is really handy. But if you're gonna buy a saw, check your dealers first. Go off of that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think that was brought up in a previous interview. I mentioned it on one of my other episodes. But you could be brand loyal. But if a dealer, I don't think I would ever buy a chainsaw from Home Depot or Lowe's. I don't think that makes sense to buy it from a dealer new, so you can build that rapport, and so you can take it to them, and they know you maybe know by name, or they know what saws you have, so they kind of work with you, type thing. But if that dealer is in they're half an hour away versus 10 minutes type thing, or you don't like the new owner, or you don't mesh well with one of their workers, I think that says a lot. And that would maybe dictate possibly if you're going to switch from one saw brand to the next. I think that is something that a lot of us need to keep in mind, especially if you're a professional that needs work on their saws, and you're not going to take it to the garage down the road. You want someone who actually knows the ins and outs, who is certified by that company to work on only Stills or only Echoes or only Husqvarnas or whatever you have.
Well, especially these days when you plug them into a computer and you do a lot of tuning stuff. I do a lot of mechanic work in my garage here. I get people that recommend me for tune-ups or fixes or whatever. These right here are customer saws, and I say that loosely because I'm not actually a saw mechanic, just hobbyist. But if I wanted to go get the computer stuff to, tune the 500i or the 572s, I don't have access to it. It's dealer only. It's proprietary stuff, and just kind of a bummer. But I have to deal with the dealer if I have a problem with my 500. That's just the way it is.
Period.
So
yeah.
Even as a mechanic, you have to deal with dealers these days, unless somehow, and maybe one of your viewers can come along and figure out how to get the program stuff. But unless you can get that program, you're kind of honked and have to deal with the dealer.
Now, let me ask you this, Brandon, because I think that there's pros and cons to the technology of a chainsaw being on it, for a chainsaw to be auto-tuned. I think a lot of us who are maybe old school or have a gist of how to work on a small gas engine, or a chainsaw, are used to tuning it by hand, either with a tachometer or with a screwdriver, whatever, just with your ear. Have you? What is your take thus far? Is it a step in the right direction? Is it something that we can't stop, or you would rather have it just having to tune it by hand, because that's what you're used to?
I could go either way right now, anyway, because this is all new technology. They're having some hiccups all the way around. It's a stepping stone to something better in the future, I think. And whatever that future thing is, it might be better than what I can do with my ear and a screwdriver. And it can adjust, right? So we're in the time of year right now where it can be 5 degrees in the morning and 50 degrees in the afternoon. And that calls for a tune adjustment. If that auto tune can do it all through the spectrum while I'm working it, that's great. I like it. If it's going to be problematic, I don't like it and I want to run a screwdriver. It's not something that I can just come down to a hard, yes, it's better, no, it's worse. Time will tell, right? We're still in the infancy of all this computer stuff in the saws, even though it's been, I guess 10 years now or so. How long have carburetors been around? So it's still, in my opinion, in its infancy. And I have high hopes for the future, that it'll all be 100% reliable and quick and efficient and all the good things.
Yeah. And I don't know much about this technology. I think I'm not at a point to be running a 500i myself, but is there a certain saw out there that you have the option to like click on and off between auto tune and able to tune it yourself? Is that even an option, or would
not
that be
to my
option?
knowledge? Not to my knowledge. I know that steel has some, like especially in the transition areas or transition eras, where you could buy a 261M, I think, that has the auto tune, or you can buy a 261 without the auto tune, but you couldn't have one that was either or, both or either or. You just had to make that choice when you bought the saw.
Yeah. What now, to follow up on that, would the option or the technology of having the switch on the same head, the same saw, to go from auto tune to non-auto tune, where you could do it with a screwdriver, would that be a good option to have, to go back and forth based on, if you're running it in my state where the temperature from the morning to the afternoon won't be as drastic as where you live, for example?
I guess it depends on the day. If the thing ain't acting right, I'm sure you got it. I wish I could switch this thing, but if it was running perfect, I don't see why you would want to not have an auto tune. Now, I guess the caveat to that would be if you're in a performance role. If you've got something ported to the nines and You want it set the way you want it set. You don't want to have to argue with whatever the engineer thought that saw needs to be.
Hmm.
Then you would definitely want to go with your own tune and jetting on your carb, and not want to have the auto tune.
Yeah.
And I guess the flip side of that is maybe in the future they'll be able to come out with some stuff that I could plug into the computer and do it on my own. That might be technology that they release to us laymen in the future, and that would be
Hmm.
great. But for now, I think that would be the caveat.
Yeah, I hear you're saying. Thank you for understanding what I was trying to ask and trying to get at. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not very often you're going into the steel uh, dealer and have them hook up your 500i or whatever saw to a computer. It's not every day, I would hope, but
No.
even to do so, that's money out of your pocket to pay for even the plugin is a service to diagnose what was happening. I would hope that your saw would be maintained enough where it would not need that, but it would have to be be pretty severe situation or case to have to go to the dealer several times in whatever time span to have them hook it up, where and just to work on it to figure out what's wrong, as opposed to
Yeah.
knowing a carb enough to tune it or to change out the carb, whatever else, and then you're back ripping, type thing. So,
Yeah. Well, if it was that bad, I'm sure we'd have heard about it by now. So,
yeah, for sure, for sure. Gotcha. Let me segue. So, sounds like that you have hopefully watched my episode on my Pinkway saw, where the manufacturer says in the manual and on the saw running a 25-to-1 mixed ratio, and I got a lot of comments on that episode. What is your take on that saw after I burned through my first gallon of mixed fuel? What would you suggest that I use next?
I think that they might suggest that 25-to-1 for like a cover their backside scenario. That way they can say that, hey, we wanted you to run it at this, and you smoked the bottom end because you were running 40-to-1. That's probably not what's going to happen. That 25-to-1 is very smoky. It's going to lend itself to the carbon built up I talked about before. It could, I'm not necessarily saying it will, but it could lead to a premature demise of that saw just based on carbon. If you're running really high quality oils like I was talking about, that would mitigate it some. But yeah, I would probably eke more towards the 40-to-1. That's a very safe range, and you're probably not going to have major carbon buildup with good oils at that ratio. Once you hit that 1 gallon, or you say 1 gallon mix, or
Yeah,
that's what you got mixed up.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a lot for a test, but maybe once you run that, pull your spark plug and look close and see if it's black and sooty or white. The white would indicate too lean, and a lot of that can be in your fuel too. If that thing is if your high jet is set rich, it'll do some of that same stuff, but you're just gonna have to kind of figure out and balance and figure where the carbon is coming from. But right now, I'd say it's probably mostly that very rich oil. What are you running for two-stroke oil?
Oh man, I don't want to admit this on YouTube. I'm actually running whatever the cheaper stuff at Ace Hardware, which I know I need to run better. I have Red Armor. I spaced on when I needed oil the last time, and it's on my table. I just need to use it. So I think that's gonna be my new go-to, because after I don't know why, but I came to a revelation this past week where I need to use better oil in my mix. Why am I using cheaper stuff? This doesn't make any sense. So I am the whole world knows now, whoever's gonna watch this, that I'm currently running cheap,
Sorry.
crappy oil.
Well, I'm sure you will fix that. And
I promise
you are
everyone I
now
will fix
educated.
I know. Thank you.
Looping around though, me for bar oil, I don't care what it is. I buy the cheapest stuff I can, because it's ultimately it's going to be slung out on the ground anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't see a value in premium bar oil if you don't need to. I shy away from people that talk about using used engine oil. If you ever, being a bit of a mechanic, if you ever take an oil filter off a car and cut it open and look at the pleats of that oil filter, there's a lot of metal in there. I don't want that metal running through my oil pump that's got very, very fine tolerances, or in every link of the stinking chain here that I could see it having premature wear on a lot of things that it just doesn't need to be. Bar oil is what, $17 a gallon for reasonably priced stuff?
Mm-hmm.
It's well worth it.
Yeah.
To run good bar oil.
To skimp on bar oil and use that money that you're saving on quality and mixed oil.
Yep.
And even if you wanted to use motor oil for your bar oil, and you would filter it with a cloth or a filter, you're still not going to get those fine bits, and then you're having to fight your saw, have it be in the mechanic to work on it. That's just not worth it, and that I agree.
Well,
but to be as
go
ahead.
Look at how talked about not buying premium oil, and I got a gallon right here. Look at how stringy and tacky that bar oil is, so that you don't get that tack out of engine oil. It's designed to stay on your chain that way, not end up all over the ground in a mess.
Yeah, when I was, and again, I will admit this as well. When I was first starting out with a chainsaw, and I was so cheap that I didn't want to buy bar oil, or I ran out and it was in a pinch, I used like vegetable oil. And that seemed to work, but then again, like I didn't know much at the time about chainsaws.
A problem with vegetable oil. I've cut ice holes for polar bear plunges. People, boneheads, crazy people jumping in ice cold water. Anyway, but I try to run vegetable oil for that, so I'm not injecting a bunch of petroleum into the lake, right?
Gotcha. Yeah, smart.
So vegetable oil is a really good thing for that. Or if you're working near a watershed, for instance, that you start seeing rainbows in the lake or pond you're cutting near, it might be worth switching to a vegetable. Or DeWalt or DGP is putting out a very, it's an organic oil of sorts. I haven't tried it yet. I know the bigger channels like Buck and Billy Ray, he's advertising it right now and pushing it pretty well. So that's something like that might be worth trying if environmental concerns are on your list.
I hear you. It's interesting to get your take on that, because I thought about doing an episode where I just put the cooking oil or maybe like different types in my saws and running it and see if that made a difference of my not necessarily cutting, but just like how hot the bar or the chain would get. And if you could see the oil in the track and on the chain, and if it was as, I mean, it won't be as tacky as what you just showed, but as an alternative to regular bar oil. Obviously, I wouldn't want to run that type of oil if I'm going to be milling, or to bucking again and again and again and again, just like maybe like one-off cut, just if you're in a pinch, but as an option. Interesting. Cool. Last thing I wanted to ask, or just to happen on this podcast, Brandon, is to give you the floor. Anything that you want to share with folks, pro tips, lessons learned, anything that you feel would be of value, something that other channels have not shared, anything, go.
Okay, so a couple things. First off, I know it was on the questionnaire, but somehow we didn't work it into the conversation. All that wood that I saw about going off the conveyor belt into the back of the truck, that doesn't get stacked. That doesn't meet the 128 cubic foot stacked requirement. Most places, if you look around, they'll tell you 180 cubic feet thrown in as a cord. I try to give 190, 195, and I will very regularly measure that out and then make sure I stack it at a customer. Like if there's elderly folks or handicapped folks, it's a really good opportunity to go in there and stack that wood, get a little bit of good positive PR points for the company, and then I have stacked that. I can go, all right, I have verified yet again that I have delivered what I was supposed to deliver, and I've got this extra 15 cubic foot that is extra over that 180 or 128. For me, there's a lot of people that stack it and then, they go off that. I would rather give away 15 cubic feet of wood thrown in at the tune of what, $4 to $10, than go through, take the time investment to stack that every time. Again, I'm dealing with bulk stuff, so it makes sense for me. And I have very, very comfortable that 180 cubic feet is definitely an acceptable measurement. So that would be one thing I want to add. And second, maybe to some of your viewers that might be customers, validate your salesmen, because in my area, there's anybody with a chainsaw and a pickup can be a firewood salesman. I know of people that have gone on to land that isn't theirs and poached wood. I've had wood ticks come and steal my piles off the job site before we can get the log truck to them. There's all sorts of that, and if they're doing that on my end, I know they're selling volumes that aren't right, prices that are inflated. Watch who you're buying it from, and if you're selling, be painfully honest. It doesn't buy you anything to misrepresent what you have. You will lose customers. You will have a bad name in your community. And as I said at the beginning, my family has been in this here for 40 years. That's a name I want to keep good in this area. The word spreads. So however you're selling your wood, green, seasoned, tree length, whatever, represent that product as exactly what it is, and you can't go wrong. People will poo-poo some of us for selling green wood. I'm not ripping anybody off because I have told them exactly what they're buying, right? So be very, very transparent in what you're selling and try to watch what you're buying.
Gotcha. Thank you for those two items, and thank you for going back to, I guess we missed that question of stacking versus piling, and it's interesting that you mentioned that in terms of knowing thrown and tossed volume wise, and then as like ever so often, like you just said, that you do verify and it works out, and to lose X amount of feet slash dollars is not worth your time. But granted, you are dealing in high volume of firewood, and you have the yard for it. But even those, and I mean, you're going directly from log to dump truck to drop off at the customer's house. So the wood usually doesn't sit even in a pile, even tossed. So, but what you do have is that's not that split. Is that covered somehow?
Again, it sits in a deck, so it doesn't get processed and then sit out at all. I mean, We tried
Did
it
it?
once, and the extra handling just wasn't worth the extra money you can get out of the seasoned wood. You know, we've
Mm-hmm.
got that big 50,000-pound excavator and a 150 cord pile. We perch the excavator on, we load the trucks off of that with the excavator,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't worth it. You know, we're getting calls during our busy season for the seasoned wood, you know, August, September, and trying to fill those orders, and we didn't have time for it. We definitely didn't want it to get to the point where it could snow on it, and then we're trying to roll snow off of the visqueen we covered it with. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't work out for our organization to store and season it.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Gotcha.
that is not something we deal with at all.
Yeah. That's good insight to share. And with what you said to validate your your firewood salesperson, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think I got a lot of crap for the episodes where I sold crappy wood, or what I called crappy wood, and sold punky wood. Um, even when I sold those cottonwood chunks, people were like, you're not. It was on one of the local Facebook groups, like, you're a bad person for selling such terrible wood for people. You rip them off. Well, I think that there's a fine line. I mean, yes, to be honest, to be transparent, but I'm not going to say in my ad, don't buy this terrible wood from me because it's terrible. I mean, to share with them what the wood is, what the moist percentage is possibly, or answer any questions they have, and they can make their own judgment or do their own research on what cottonwood is, what funky wood is. But at least you're not being dishonest by it. But
Yeah. So
to the point where you're going to kill
the
your sale. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the state of Alaska Division of Forestry put out a little chart or whatnot. I actually think I sent it to you in Messenger here a couple nights ago, where it has all those BTUs per cord listed. I took a screenshot of that, and every time I try to sell something like that, I will put that information, what it is, in the ad. And actually, you know how you when you list that stuff, you can put the pictures in, and I will put that screenshot in there and say, look, this is priced based on this. It still has BTUs, and if you are good enough with math, and sometimes I am, sometimes I just wake up on the wrong side of the bed half asleep, you can figure out the actual cost per BTU of for me, the birch, the spruce, the cottonwood, the heating oil, the propane. When you start adding all those and listing all those, people can actually see that, okay, if I'm selling birch at 26 million BTUs per cord at $300 a cord, and I've got a bunch of cottonwood that I just don't have room for, and I'm selling it at 60% of that for 40% of the price, that's a deal, right? But sometimes you actually have to lay that out for folks. And I think it's worth doing from time to time.
Yeah. So you're saying so before that you're the one on Marketplace on your phone or whatever, dealing with customers on that venue, and then you would forward that information to your dad, and dad would load them whatever else. When you're communicating with people, um, does it get to the point where they ask too many questions? I mean, not to hash out again, asking the wrong
Yeah.
questions, but is there a customer that is asking good questions, but just or maybe asking too many before you're like, yeah, I'm done with you?
Yeah, actually that does happen sometimes. And I'm pretty upfront with them at that. I say, look, this is what I've had in the past. I want you to go away from this deal happy. I want to go away from this deal happy. If you have any concerns with this, and this could go to a point where you don't think this is a good deal, I would much rather just have you go to somebody else and actually maybe be happy than give me your money and maybe not be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It works better for both of us that way. And
Yeah.
that's kind of just a gut feeling scenario. I mean, you get people that they just want to talk. They just want to visit with you and ask questions. That's a different scenario than somebody that's giving you the third degree over your product than what you might get.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I found that I am a bit of a chatterbox sometimes, so I tend to go that first direction fairly regularly, especially on wood stuff, which everybody in this conversation and watching is probably fairly passionate about. So yeah, maybe not too many questions, but the wrong questions, or too many of the wrong questions, or the wrong attitude, maybe.
Yeah. The tone. Yeah. I think as I mentioned before on my channel, I want to be transparent and open, but I don't want to kill myself. But I want to be available and communicative to my buyers, even if it's just like one firewood bundle, but to make sure that they feel good about what they're buying, because sometimes that $5 is all they have to stay warm for the night, type thing. So to be available to have them to ask me questions and I can answer honestly, because maybe they're not informed or they don't know how to ask it on Google. I don't know, whatever it is, but I like you to want to be more communicative than not, and I think that to have some sort of rapport with your buyer to a certain point. You're not going to join them for a beer after you sell them your firewood, type thing, but at least they can trust you enough where they feel good about the sale. They're gonna go home with the wood and then next fall start burning it, and it's going to be a quality product where they'll call you again, next, I guess maybe now, like springtime, for next fall's wood, for example. So yeah, there's a lot of bad sellers out there, the one-offs type thing that give us firewood salesmen a bad name, and people are hesitant to even approach it. But yeah, it's I appreciate how you go about your firewood process and your business. Thank you for being a quality product kind of person.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. It's been fun.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add before we sign off, Brandon?
You know what? If I add too much, we're gonna be here all night, and it'll be a great conversation. But my phone's gonna run out of battery. My little headset's gonna run out of battery, and we'll ruin the interview if everything just falls off flat at the end. So I'm gonna say no.
Sounds good.
Maybe we'll pick it up another time.
Yeah. I mean, I think for a few of us, to have like a round 2 interview, for sure. Well, Brandon will be in the comment section. So if you have any questions for him up in Alaska, let him know. But I want to say goodbye to Brandon. Say goodbye to everyone.
Bye, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks. So enjoy your Sunday. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to be on the podcast, let me know. Again, to be an addict, to be obsessed, kind of interchange, but to find an outlet to talk about firewood is what you have here. Not everyone has an outlet to chat about firewood. I think people who don't do firewood think that we are the little nuts, and we are. And be proud of that. We are crazy. We love firewood, and we love to talk about firewood. And here, on this podcast, we can do that. So, and again, being a podcast, you can listen to us as you're cutting wood, in the car driving to work, on your computer, not necessarily on YouTube, because this is audio. You don't need to watch us, but it is cool to watch us interact, especially the background with my background and his. But you can listen to us in your earpiece if you would like to. Anyway, rock and roll, stay safe, keep cutting. Cheers.